Welcome to Talking in Stations. I am Matterall here with Ashterothi. How you doing, Ash?
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashterothi, and I've had a pretty darn good week last couple of days. I did 3 hours of stream so far today, and getting through the holidays, and it looks like, knock on wood, I might actually make it through the year. So, looking good for me. How about you?
Good. Definitely looking good in that sweater.
Yeah, I love it, man. This is the best. It says I drink and I know things. We decided there was no other ugly Christmas sweater for me this year.
Oh, it's awesome. All right. Today is December 29th. We're nearing the end of the year. We've got the holidays behind us now. And oh my God, there's been a ton of activity today on all levels. So we're going to get into it with you guys now and get you up to date on the news. Some of the stuff that we're going to preview today are some Keepstar attacks that happened on both sides. So PAPI attacked some Keepstars and Imperium attacked one too. Off the warpath, we have Triumvirate and Darkside fighting it out. I think Darkside of the Eclipse. There's a massive faction war news break that just came out. We'll talk about that. Gal Mill looking like it's falling apart. And then we have Trigger Happy disbanding a little bit later in the program. Lots of stuff going on. But first, I do want to catch up with you, Ashterothi. What have you been up to? Tell us about your stream. Oh, before you do that, Gregorian's with us too. Sorry, Gregorian.
How's it going?
All right. Ash, tell us about your stream.
Yeah, well, we've been playing around with the winter events. I'm a really, really big fan of this event. So we yeeted out into Lowsec once again today. I in the Ikitursa you can see behind me, and then we had a few more battle cruisers and whatnot. We actually went out once and got quickly kind of chased down by a couple of battleships that ended up getting one of our Myrmidons. But then we retooled, came back into it, and went back into Lowsec again. But last night was the really good one because wait.
Myrms are really slow, right? Like it's a slow ship.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we had they were caught. He was caught by a Praxis and a Maelstrom, I think it was. It is insane what's going on out there right now. I'm telling you, because like I said, you can just yeet out into these low-sec systems, and so you find all kinds of crazy stuff out there. In fact, last night we jumped out with I think 6 people. And as soon as we landed, I started seeing that there's a bunch of open sites. So I started descanning them all at 5 degrees like I used to in Plexus. And
wait, why 5 degrees?
So if you set your descan to 5 degrees,
directional is your directional scanner for those that don't know on your ship.
Correct. So your directional scanner has a range setting and a cone width setting. And that cone width is based on the center of your screen. So if you set your cone width to 5 degrees and your range to maximum, and then you hold down the descan button, you can click on multiple celestials in space on your overview, and your camera will snap to them one by one, and you'll instantly descan those locations, giving you every ship at that location, assuming it's in range, other than Force Recon ships, so like curses and stuff like that. Everything else, as long as they're decloaked, you'll be able to see it on the descan. So I jump in, start checking the sites, and immediately find a Praxis in a site. Warp our fleet on top of them and kill a 200 million-isk Praxis within like 5 minutes of the event starting. And then from there, we continue to make about 100 million-isk an hour each for about an hour or two last night and then again today. So it's incredibly rewarding. It's one of those things that like if you try to do it solo, it's kind of a pain. But as soon as you start having at least 3 or 4 people to go do it with, it ends up being really, really fun. And not very difficult to execute.
Yeah. Gregorian, you were going to squeeze in there. What were you going to say?
I was going to point out that curses are combat recons, not force recons. Force recons are the ones with cloak and light Xynos.
Okay.
Yep.
So some of those are immune to being scanned down or descanned, right?
Correct. One of the recons are allowed to have Covops cloaks, and the other recon simply does not appear on directional scan ever. It doesn't require a module or anything.
Yeah. I remember that was controversial when it came out because they were like, this doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that?
It was a change I was really unhappy with, to be frank. But I mean, we've gotten used to it.
Well, that tight cone maneuver that you do, right? 5 degrees only means you have a tight beam, so you're not getting extra stuff. And then you're pointing at different celestials that you're clicking on the map. And so what you're doing is combing through the system in the likely areas where people are. So you're getting two things. One is who's in system and also where they are, as opposed to putting 180 degrees and blasting your radar out to see like 10 or 15 things show up, but you don't know exactly where they are.
Yeah, if I want to know just what's in the system, then I'll go to 360 degrees max speed, max range, and go. But that'll probably have a lot of noise to it. If I'm specifically, especially if I'm trying to kill somebody, right? When you first get into a system, you are now on the clock, right? Because as soon as that person notices that something is going wrong, he's going to be GTFOing. Yeah. And hopefully they're in the middle of a fight, which means that they're scrammed. So, but either way, I don't have very much time. So as soon as we jump in, I need to identify which, if any, sites are currently occupied. And if one of them is occupied by something that we can get, I need to get us on top of it as soon as possible. So
and it worked.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
What was the Praxis doing?
Well, it was just running the site.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, let me pull up the kill mail.
All right, send it over.
Let me scroll past all my awards.
Okay, but you as a group, you and your group are making pretty good money doing this stuff, right? This event.
Yeah. So CCP Fozzie actually said that they specifically made this event, like events are designed to be rewarded, in the same way that like AFK ratting is something that they've been going after because they want to go after low activity or low, engagement gameplay. They want to reward high engagement gameplay. And so doing these event sites, especially in the more dangerous areas, has been very lucrative this whole year. But given the fact that it's Christmas and they wanted to kind of celebrate and have everybody feel good about things, CCP Fozzie said that they actually put the loot on the upper end of things. And the other thing that's noteworthy is, especially in the last several events, they've started putting the majority of the event loot in the form of Overseer's effects, which are purchased by Concord on NPC buy orders. So this isn't something like it used to be that like on day one, if you got the cool drop, then you could rush it off to sale and get billions. But after day But after day 1 or 2, the market collapses and people really don't know how to move this stuff. And I even complained about it before, where it's like I have to pay out to people, but I don't really know I have a good way to liquidate this stuff. Having the majority of the value be in Overseer's effects, with jackpots being in the form of implants and skins and stuff, I think works a lot better when it comes to just making sure that it feels valuable to people.
So how's that working? That means you're constantly getting at least a certain level of reward that you can hand out because you know what the price is on that stuff when you sell it.
Right. So for instance, 2 or 3 sites in a row today, we got upwards of 120 million ISK per site. And that's simply in the Overseer's effects. If you get a 22 grade Overseer effect, that's 120 million. And I know somebody who got one of those. You can get them in HiSec too. They're extremely much less common. HiSec sites, combat offers roughly 4 to 10 million ISK per site on average, with spikes of like 30 to 40. But like you can still get those really big jackpots anywhere. And the best sites are in low sec, and they're not much harder than normal sites. So it's not like you have to be like tanked that much better. It's just they're a little bit longer, and obviously you're in low sec.
So you're at risk when you do it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Scanning and exploration sites, and I've gotten up to 17th grade Overseers.
Yes, the scanning. So that's the other thing. You not only have combat sites, there's also hacking and mining sites. And if you do those, they're actually pretty lucrative as well. Mining is probably not as lucrative as like combat, but it's definitely functional because you mine the ice and then you turn it in and then you get these prize boxes, and the prize boxes have the Overseer's effects and the skins and all that kind of stuff. So, as far as AFK goes, it will get you some money. Again, if you do it in low sec, you'll make a lot of money, and it's actually really interesting because only mining ships and industrial ships can get into those sites, so you have a certain amount of protection. So if you really want to be ballsy and go out with an endurance, you can actually make a ton of money right now in these sites.
Yeah, one of my corp mates has brought all of his alts and procurers and fought everyone else off with his ball of drones.
Yes, that's another good one. And then the data sites are a little bit less of a payout, but the reason why is because they seem to spawn in clusters, and they only have one hack point each. So the point of these is that they're supposed to be hard to scan down, but that's the majority of the activity. Once you've scanned it down, you just kind of show up and hack it. So, but you're expected to kind of have to be scanning these down like fast. Like as I was warping to one, I'm scanning down the next. And if you do it at that rate, then it's pretty good ISK. If you're just worried about the price of one can, then it's probably about a third of the value of doing combat sites at the same time.
Wild. Well, good job. And it's nice to remind everyone that there's still time to get out there. This all ends January 5th, but you still have some days.
Yeah, and also there's login rewards, and also there's daily tasks, and some of those daily tasks will give you the filaments required to do it. So once you get one of those filaments, here, let me pull some up. See, this is my loot from today, 652 million estimated.
Nice.
I'm stuck in solitude right now, which is unfortunate. But
well, yeah.
So these filaments are super cheap right now, even though, and they drop pretty frequently, and they come in 1, 5, and 10 man, and you also get these in the sites, and they either go to low sec, high sec, or null sec. And so if you bring a 10 man high sec with you, then when you're done, you just bring everybody home. And sure, there's a 1 in 6 chance that you end up in solitude, but them's the breaks, I guess.
Yeah. Solitude's special because it's a bit of an island. So you could get stuck out there. You'd have to cross through nullsec just to get back. Which
made me realize that this is really a good sign that CCP was super mean about this, because so the metaliminal storms have to travel travel one jump at a time, but they have to travel only within areas that are like allowed for them. And the high sec storm is stuck in high sec, which means the storm that's in solitude will never leave solitude at all, period, during the entire winter event. There will always be a metaliminal winter storm in solitude, and therefore there will always be a chance that if you use a high sec filament, you will end up in solitude.
Well, until the 5th, but yeah.
Yeah, well,
I like this. I wish the high sec islands had more reasons to visit there, because I like those island spaces like Solitude, Placid, and Iridia.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, is Placid also have a storm on it? Okay, so then there's a couple of chances of
Placid doesn't have a storm. It has a high sec island.
Right. Oh, well, Spod was also saying Placid Island. So if Placid also has a storm, then it'll be in the same boat. But yeah, I mean, like, I'm sure that they did that intentionally, because otherwise it just becomes a guaranteed way to high sec.
Well, use your map. Use your map and look up storms. You'll be able to see if it's there.
I don't think Placid has a storm, but I've filamented into Blackrise very close to Placid.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Placid, though, and Iridia both are islands, but you travel through low sec to escape those islands. Solitude's a little bit different. You have to travel through null sec, which means you can get bubbled.
Yeah, there's a path through Iridia to get to Solitude.
Yeah, but you have to cross at some point, I thought, through nullsec. Or is that maybe Iridia doesn't? Yeah.
That only the northern route you have to cross through Syndicate.
Okay, you're right. Well, Iridia is more dangerous than Syndicate sometimes, but so does Placid have it? Placid does have a little high sec island up there, near Stackman.
Iridia does not. Now we get to find out that I don't actually know where Placid is, apparently.
Oh, Placid's top left. It's by Syndicate. Okay. Yeah, and Blackrise.
Oh, there it is. Jeez.
Yeah.
It looks like it has a low sec one.
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah.
but
there you are in Solitude.
Yeah, Solitude has the heart of it in high sec, which means that one isn't going to leave, as far as I know. So
I like that sense of humor.
That, I feel like CCP Fozzie did that intentionally.
Yeah, definitely has his markings.
And on day one, like when they put down the metaliminal storms, they did so in kind of cheeky places in the first place. And then these new ones, several of them were in pretty cheeky places too. So like on day one, I used a low sec filament and ended up in the New Eden system at the Eve Gate. So it's like, okay, yeah, this was a coincidence, I'm sure.
All right. Well, let's go to the board and see what's going on in our...
Well, just one last thought on that. Before just to wrap it up.
Sure. Right. Sorry.
The interesting thing about that is, one of the things that's cool about this, we just reflected on it in two different ways. By using these filaments as part of this content, like getting to content, what it actually does is shows people, brings people, and it gets people to engage with parts of space that they didn't even plan on. Like in other aspects where it's like, oh, well, I need to go into Garissus nullsec in order to do the Easter event or whatever. That's still a choice, right? Like I may choose not to go there because I don't want to go into that system. But when I use a yeet filament, I'm going to wherever it takes me, which means by putting those things, the destinations in key places, CCP can subtly help like shuttle people to interesting locations or interesting situations. So that's why I mean that by it's not an accident that they put it in the New Eden system, because that, like, for the next several days, people are either at the Eve Gate or adjacent to the Eve Gate, to the point where even with the fleet that I was with was like, hey, everybody, look off. If you look off to the galactic north, you can see the Eve Gate itself. Like nobody planned for that. It was just an opportunity to engage with that, which I really enjoyed.
Little Eve Safari. All right. Can I just admire how well your setup is? You can see the game behind you. That's just brilliant. Good work. Okay, let's actually open up the screen and have a look at where we are with news today. This is the wrong shape. And wow, the 29th is a big, big day. Not only do we have a big weekend with some announcements coming out about war bonds for the Imperium. Of course, we had the truce between everyone, at least in the Delve area where the war is happening. There was a Christmas truce, like the one for World War I in real life, where they play a little soccer. And they even had
how did that work out?
They had a little soccer game. I don't know how it worked out. We were trying to get information on that yesterday, but we thought that was pretty cool. It's kind of a non-violent soccer game with spaceships in the middle of a war zone. So if that doesn't take you back to 18? Is that what it was? Yeah. So basically, there was a truce between the two groups in Delve, PAPI and Imperium, on the 24th and 25th. But after that, everything accelerated. And that's what we've started to see happen today. Gregorian, what actually happened today on the war front?
There were, this morning, there was a fight over an Ashterothi, which PAPI successfully killed it, but bled pretty hard to kill it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's more of a win for the Imperium than for PAPI.
It's the opposite of what happened the other day, right?
I guess so.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like, and then for those, let me interrupt you here for a second. Sorry. Just for people who didn't catch the show yesterday, we were looking at a battle report with 99.5% efficiency for PAPI after one of their, I believe it was a Rorqual, got tackled. Everybody jumped in to fight, and the Imperium came out really messed up. They lost.
Are you talking about the Titan?
Yeah. It wasn't a Rorqual, it was a Titan then. Yeah, how much did the Imperium lose in that fight? That was a huge amount.
20 dreads.
Right. And PAPI didn't lose anything. So that was like, it looked like PAPI was in trouble, but Imperium paid a huge price. Today, the opposite happens. It looks like Imperium's in trouble, but PAPI pays a huge price. That's why I was comparing those two things.
Well, for that one, the Imperium jumped enough suicide dreads in. It was clearly a one-way trip. They jumped enough to kill it without to being ISK positive. They just didn't manage to kill it.
Yeah, it's definitely a suicide squad, isn't that right, Ashterothi? Okay. Anyway.
Well, I mean, dreads are often used for that purpose, right? Like when you send a fleet of dreads in, you're not doing it to bring them home. You're doing it to kill whatever it is. But you said that they failed to kill their target.
They didn't get
right.
That's never good. That's never good.
So it's just a waste.
When you commit a dread bomb and it whiffs, that is a painful experience. Because like I just said, you don't send them out to make them come home.
All right. So that was yesterday, and today where I interrupted Gregorian. So carry on.
And today, PAPI reinforced 3 Keep Stars, 7 Sotios, and some other things in Delve.
Wow.
And the Imperium, the alliances deployed to the east, like the Initiative and the Bastion, reinforced a Keep Star, a Sotio, and some other stuff in I guess it would be catch an impasse.
That's a lot of stuff. Looks like they're setting up for a big finale. From what I've read, it's a big finale, but it's going to continue into January. This is an escalation in tempo.
And when Gobbins did his town hall, he said that things would get faster for January, faster, more aggressive. I guess this is what he meant.
Yeah, this is definitely a part of that. If you look back at the war, there's been a certain strategy that PAPI has used, and that is a rhythm that is irregular, so that there is no good cadence that your opponents can latch onto, so that they know when to rest and when not to rest. So without that cadence, so what was happening in the last 3 or 4 months has been a slow, fast, slow, slow, fast, slow, slow, fast, 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 slow. Like they have totally kept it irregular to keep the surprise attacks coming. And that is really, it's kind of been interesting to watch. That's why we're interrupted with these giant spasms of activity. And then it seems like there's a lull and things are calm. And then you think something big's going to happen and nothing happens. It's just kind of, but now it seems like they're definitely in a fast mode. And I think we're getting near the end of some of the military objectives that PAPI has wanted to take on, right? Like they're in Delve, that was an objective, and they are really assaulting 1DQ. They're not having much success with that yet, and they may not have success with that. It was well defended before, but they really are tearing up everything outside of 1DQ and the Helm's Deep area in the north there, which I don't think they're that interested in yet.
Well, so what you're seeing here is a war that's not about spaceships, but about psychology, right? So this is really leading to two different things when it comes to this specifically. One, this is the reason why PAPI does put a structure right next to 1DQ, even when they're not, excuse me, even when they aren't ready to attack it right this second. Because by putting that pressure on their home, that forces the Imperium to not take their eye off the ball. And that relieves a lot of pressure, so that way they can go and kill all of these other places. And when the Imperium makes their calculations about this, those other places are now being balanced against the threat that is existing in 1DQ. So that makes it so that the Imperium are significantly less willing to defend their assets, which allows them to strike at them more effectively and quicker. And this is important because what really needs to happen is that PAPI and their leadership need to convince the Imperium membership that they have lost. And if they can do that, then they can cause them to defect. They can cause them to no longer wish to be part of the fight and no longer defend. If they feel, and better yet, if they can convince the Imperium members to feel like the Imperium leadership has betrayed them or used them in some way, then that's like ultimate. So with the long goal of PAPI, it isn't about a 1DQ keep star or anything like that. It's about making sure that the overall understanding and expectation is that PAPI is winning and goons are losing. And this is why anytime you see this kind of narrative or discussion comes up, the Imperium becomes very, very protective of the idea of whether or not they're going to win. Because as long as the idea that they are still defending themselves and still on a winning track, then they can remain cohesive. They can keep their morale up. But if through a series of strikes and feints and exhaustion and propaganda, they can begin to cause the Imperium members to lose their will to fight, that is truly the only way that this war ever gets won by the PAPI forces.
It's very interesting that this weekend on the Fireside Chat, we actually should bring that up and maybe go through it. It is a half hour long, but if we have time, there's a lot of news today. If not, we'll do it tomorrow. That during that Fireside Chat, there was a lot of rhetoric about, hey, we're actually winning this war. And not only are we tougher than them, but we're actually winning this war. And we're about to win the entire thing. Like there was a huge disconnect, but the disconnect might be on purpose, to keep morale high.
From the Imperium point of view, they can say that PAPI has never actually struck at the main target, and therefore the real defenses has not actually been demonstrated. However, the defenses that they've used up until this point have been more or less sufficient, proving that when it comes time to defend, they will be able to do so. And all of this other stuff is just fluff and distraction. That would be, and the understanding expectation is that it is all fluff and distraction. All of these other structures, to the massive wealth of the Imperium, and the wealth that it will take to actually defend or take 1DQ as an actual system, or what would be lost or transferred if it does fall, is pittance compared to the structures that are being fought over at the moment. So if, for example, the Imperium did win in some decisive way that causes PAPI to stop their invasion, the notion that they could just reclaim their territory as they need to and rebuild their infrastructure relatively trivially is actually not a bad argument. So they're definitely still in it. And if nothing else, it's like any other game, right? They may not know what the winning path right now is, but they know for a fact that it's not giving up. So they have to be convinced that there is a winning path if they ever wish to seek it.
Yeah. Okay, so again, this new pace that PAPI has projected today took out, actually didn't take out, but reinforced 3 keep stars and a slew of other stuff as well, so TOs and other structures. But the Imperium struck back, didn't they, Gregorian?
Yeah. Some of the smaller alliances in the Imperium have deployed to harass Legacy, and I think this was a really good idea. I was wondering why they hadn't been doing that earlier when they started doing that. So they reinforced a much smaller group reinforced a keep star. This Imperium deployment is much smaller, and they still managed to reinforce a keep star, as well as a Sotio and some smaller structures.
Okay, so they're definitely doing some counter offensives, counter timers. The question is, who can win the actual timer, the final timer that dictates whether the structure wins or lives or dies. And that's been hard for Imperium to do in the East, right? Like, I'm thinking about the keep star that was reinforced, that belonged to Test and Curse. And when it really mattered, Test was able to get people there to defend it, and it was defended. So we haven't really seen, I don't know if we've seen them destroy important structures in Legacy space yet. If they have, it's news to me. I don't know. But you want to create counter timers so that you create choices. If I am going to attack and delve to knock out a structure, and my structure in Legacy space, my home space, is in trouble, which one do I go to? Now I have to make a choice. Whereas if you didn't do that timer, that counter timer, I wouldn't have to make a choice. I would just attack and delve.
Right, exactly. So this is actually kind of the exact same concept, right? We're trying to take the enemy's eye off the ball, right? If we can cut any attention that they can deviate to the secondary war zone is attention that they're not having to deal with in Delve. So if they can get their allies to run amok in softer areas, then they can either do a disproportionate amount of damage because it's not being defended effectively, or draw the attention of the attacking forces. Whether or not this is going to be effective is hard to say. This actually reminds me of, like, if you've ever played any real-time strategies like StarCraft, and like your base starts getting attacked, but you don't have quite enough to deal with the attacking forces, and your automated defenses will deal with some of them, soften them up a bit, but you have some big force somewhere else, and so you commit to attack their base. So you both destroy each other's base, and then build a new base in the ruins of each other's base, and then look at each other again and go, "I'm still going to kill you."
Yeah.
So we'll see whether or not this counterattack actually ends up causing a dent in things.
This actually happened in EVE Online too, and I think it was one of the first times we'd seen it on a large scale. But in 2018, there was huge fights that involved tons of Titans. Right? Anybody who was here at the time remembers that. UALX. What's the one in the north? X-47, and there was like 4 or 5 different massive fights that were going on. But the people did say this is like I think it was called Base Wars or something, where people were attacking in the south and attacking in the north at the exact same time. And so everybody had to make choices. Where do we move our troops? Do we help our friends in the south, or do we stay up here and defend our home in the north? And there were a lot of simultaneous timers that were being made by both groups. It was really interesting to see, but I remember them talking about that same concept back in 2018. Okay, let's have a look again. So is that all the war news there? Or is there more, Gregorian?
Well, I'm in a fleet right now, but I don't talk about ongoing fleets.
What's there? So there's more going on, some more reinforcement going on.
There was a fight in GE TAC earlier, but that's over.
Okay. Was there something in Outer Ring? Because we heard that Bastion was active there.
That was not a war-related fight.
No, sorry, you're right. That was something else. I was looking at... That's Triumvirate. That's our next story, but here's the one. I did hear, though, that Bastion was active in Pureblind, or they were wondering why they were up there in Pureblind. This is Goonswarm Federation versus Fraternity. And this happened in Aquarius. Okay, so you're on a mission. You can't really talk about that, but there is ongoing stuff. A slew of timers. Tomorrow is going to be a big day. I believe they're going to do the armor timers for everything. And those are the critical timers, because once you hit final timers, in some situations, final timer is really just a formality. But the armor timer is when, if you're going to put up a fight, that's usually when you put up a fight. Yeah, I'll put that.
So since we can't discuss active, ongoing intel, why don't we just ask this question? If someone is hearing all of this and going, oh, wow, it's getting exciting, how do I get involved? How would they get involved for both sides?
Well, I'd say, not that I'm biased at all or anything, but the easiest and fastest way to get involved would be to apply in-game to Pandemic Horde.
Well, and on the other side, there's Karma Fleet, but I think, and I'm not sure about this.
Most of the Imperium corporations have tightened recruitment in order to keep out the low-effort spies.
Horde doesn't bother.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I think that it's a little harder to get into Karma Fleet now than it was during peacetime. Yeah, you can apply to Brave, probably. That's a new player-friendly place. We're talking about new players that are new to the game, not necessarily players that are new to the war.
No, I'm not talking about new players. I'm just talking about people that were not involved, who have been on the sidelines, and now they want to get involved. How do they get involved, new or not?
Well, you just go to the war zone and third party, I suppose, if you want. If you want to pick a side, then you contact... The answer that I got was the answer I was looking for. Well, those are your on-ramps for new recruits and stuff. But if you have your own group already, you just kind of want to play in this arena, you normally would just go down there and pick people off if you could. Stragglers from fleets is usually a good, easy target, right? Because as a fleet moves, they always leave like 3 or 4 guys behind that missed the last instruction, and you can catch them and kill them. And normally, if it's important and the fleet's in a rush, they won't turn around and save them. Actually, not normally, but that's the exception. Normally, they will come back and try to defend their guys, because they don't want that reputation of leaving guys behind. There's that kind of stuff. There's also just gate camping. You know, if you have a group already that exists. If you're a new player and you want to get involved, because I think you were asking that for new players, yes, Horde and maybe Karma Fleet.
I would say that probably anybody who wants to get involved could at least begin by reaching out to those groups' leadership and begin the process if you want to.
You know, you bring up a good question, because how do you get in touch with a group that you don't know? Well, let's go and look at .land Eve, right? And you can use in-game tools for this, but we'll just use this since we have a browser here. But if you go to any group like Nullsecnia, and you hit their overview, I guess maybe you have to do this on a corporate level. So go to a corporation.
Yeah, it's usually on corporation level.
Yeah.
If you want to join a corporation other than the non-selective take everyone ones like Main Horde or Brave, then you can check a lot of the corporations that have recruitment ads and talk to them on the whatever Discord server they link to talk to them about joining.
Yeah. Well, let's say I wanted to get involved with something that Nullsecnia Schulpen was involved with, right? So I would look here and see like, oh, I have Revica. I have heard of Revica. I want to see if I can get in with them, and then I'll be involved in a lot of this stuff. And usually right here they'll have contact information. Now this is in the game as well, but it's also on Dotland. And so they make it even easier. Here they have a recruitment channel, so you can just join that channel. In this case, Revica Dot. And you basically, that's where you go to contact them. So they're giving you a way in, and a lot of corporations have this. Now let's go to a corporation like Burn Eden. Although they are recruiting, they're a long time, they're a very old and powerful corporation. They probably wouldn't recruit. But it says here, for recruitment, contact these guys specifically. They'll tell you, by the way, if you contact them, you need to have like over 100 million SP or something like that. But let's look at Evolution.
Which corporation is this?
It's Burn Eden.
Yeah, I saw a recruitment ad a couple of weeks ago, and they actually looked like they're a lot more. Their standards aren't as high as I expected, but I'm sure the unofficial standards are they only recruit the best of the best.
Yeah, and a group like Evolution that's historic, they'll just say nothing. Like there's no recruitment channel for them. They basically say if you cannot adapt, those who cannot adapt become victims of evolution, and that's it. Like they don't have anything else for you.
Yeah, Evolution and a couple other NC Corps like Shiva are invitation only.
Well, let me look up Shiva real quick. Shiva is a storied corporation as well. It's also the home of Nidaspar, one of the tournament guys. There he is. And Killer B, of course, right? It's a German, mostly corp. But they do have recruitment contacts. But again, they don't make it public because it's right here, invitation only. So literally, these are the groups you can't really just get into. They have to get to know you first. And that's just how it used to be in EVE Online. It still is in some circles. Okay, but I like that question. Ashterothi gave us a chance to say, what are the on-ramps to this war? How do I get involved?
And if you've been flying around doing a lot of stuff that people, you can get yourself into a corp that requires a vouch if one of those people will say that you're competent and trustworthy. So
yeah. And some places take 2 vouches, and a person can't vouch unless you've been there. At least in DICE, right? A destructive influence, you can't vouch unless you've been in the corp for 6 months. They have these little rules. What they're trying to do is minimize low effort spies. There's always spies that really play a long game. They'll cultivate a personality that they mean to use as a spy, and they'll do that for 6 months to a year. And it's really funny because people like Elise Randolph, when he does spies, I don't know if he still does this, but he'll develop like 20, 30 of them. I mean, he develops a dozen characters that are new, and he'll start to raise them, knowing that he'll have opportunities to use them later. But he's kind of growing his historical record to make it look like an actual player, as opposed to somebody who creates a character and then throws it into a corp.
I'm going to hijack this for just a second because this is actually this dovetails into something that I recommend all the time, which is a practice that I call growing blank clones, right? If you use your buddy code, and you can use your main's buddy code to buddy code your alt, so to spawn up a new account, you get 1 million skill points for free for that character, right? But that 1 million skill points is applied to the account, and you have to then use the redemption window to redeem it to a specific character, which means it's not part of any given character until it is redeemed. So what you can do is you can actually begin to train alphas on that account, one at a time, obviously, up to 5 million skill points. And I recommend training what I call the Magic 14 which would be the 14 skills that are useful no matter what. Oh gosh, my son has something to say. Hold on one second. The goal there is that if you need to, you end up with upwards up to 3 different characters on an account, but really one that has 5 million allocated skill points that are useful no matter what ship you fly, and then 1 million unallocated SP that could then be applied to whatever you want to basically make that character into whatever you want, whenever you want. And so you begin the process of growing like 10 or 12 of these, and within 5 to 7 months, you will have a bank of clones to use for whatever you need.
Yeah, and I know that Villy does that with his alts too. They all start embedded in some other alliance, and then once he's done with spying them, then he brings them into test. Like if you look at any of the obvious Villy alts that are in his corp with his usual character clothing, they have various different corp histories.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to mix it up. You need to make them. You need to make their resume look real instead of like, hey, this guy only belonged to, he knows too much to belong to this sort of thing.
Right, but a lot of the times, what you do is you put in a little bit of attention, get a guy into a corp, and then just kind of stick them in. And there's a lot of corps that you can just kind of leave a character in, and then when something's happening, I'll even admit to it as an alliance leader myself. Like when there's a problem with somebody, the first thing I'm going to do is look at his history to see how long he's been in the corp. So if you have if you just sit around for like 4 or 5 months, you're going to psychologically gain a level of trust, because it become like you basically, if nothing else, you no longer present that red flag, if that makes sense. And ultimately, especially if the alliance or a corp has more than 100 people, chances are you'll be able to just fade into the faces with that character.
Yeah. Anyway, too taxing for me. I don't like the spy game. It's way too much gaming. Okay, well, let's go on.
One of the things about
let's go on. Go ahead and finish, and then we'll go on.
Is that the reason why they're effective at weeding out spies is that vouching someone usually means that you agree to be removed from the corp if this turns out to be a spy.
Yeah, I don't know if you agree to it, but it's definitely going to make you look bad. So you got to be really, really sure about the people you're putting in. You can't just talk to someone for a couple days and say, you sound good. Jump in. Okay. Non-war news. Triumvirate and Dark Side of the Eclipse. What can you tell us about that fight?
Well, Dark Side of the Eclipse is a group. They're mainly former fountain renters who started their own alliance in Outer Ring NPC space when it stopped being possible to rent Fountain from the Initiative and the Bastion back in July and August.
Right.
Their leader is PJ Hustle, who ran for CSM this year.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well,
and they've been fighting Triumvirate recently. Triumvirate, shortly before the war began, left PanFam, shed all corps besides the lead corp, No Mercy, and decided to move to, at the time I thought it was Veil of the Silent, but they eventually settled in Cloud Ring, and they seem to be deployed to fight in Dark Side of the Eclipse in Outer Ring.
Yeah. Well, this is what was being talked about in TIS today. Is like, hey, Bastion, what are you doing up there in Pure Blind area? And I'm sure maybe it has to do with this, right? Helping them, because you have Goonswarm Federation on here. I don't know how many fighters were from Goonswarm, but there's Bastion on here as well, fighting.
Yeah, Carnero said that it was one corp that is deployed there, and he said that they don't really speak that much English, so I'll look up the corp in game now to see what their language is.
Sirmaka or Siramansi. Here, I'll do it. By the way, you can, let's see. See, the alliance, or sorry, the corporation.
Oh, it looks like they're Ukrainian.
Interesting. Well, I did that so much it blew up. I accidentally closed that tab. Okay, well,
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah,
so
this
they're
corp
up
looks
there.
like it's Ukrainian.
All right, so that is Triumvirate duking it out up here in Outer Ring. That's actually above Fountain. I used to live in Outer Ring, actually. Outer Ring is known as NPC space because that is where Outer Ring excavations are, and those are the ones that build most of the mining ships. And some of the faction mining gear is from up there.
Yep. Or stands for Outer Ring Excavations, which is a corporation created by a Gallente mogul years back, who found I think it was a big spodmane deposit
It was
in Outer Ring.
It was I forget what the mineral was, but it was one of the ones that can't be found in nullsec anymore because it's only low sec.
Yeah, it was Noxium. That was the mineral, but I thought it was spodmane was the ore, but I don't remember exactly.
Let's ask Dr. Spod. He's in the audience today. All right.
Yeah, actually, here it is. Ready? Before the discovery of Noxium changed the way the industry functioned, the Outer Ring was considered nothing more than an average parcel of space. That's why the Outer Ring excavations was able to get their start here, mining the low-end ores while braving unlawful space. But once the process for refining Noxium was discovered, the Outer Ring became a gold mine. Outer Ring excavations quickly became leaders in the field of asteroid mining. Of course, such wealth always brings challenges. For decades, Ore called Mortis Legion their closest allies. Their highly trained and proficient mercenaries patrolled the Outer Ring for troublemakers, focusing on particular for the Serpentis, who made regular raids into the area. The Serpentis had the last laugh, though, when they bought a majority share in Ore. Now the Serpentis prowl the space lanes in the Outer Ring virtually unopposed. Update to that. Except for when Upwell was formed. Upwell was created by the former CEO of Ore, Yanni, and one of the first things that they did when they created Upwell was bought back Ore. So now Ore is owned by Upwell, and sent the Mortis Legion to go blow up all of the serpents that they could find, which was the Shadow of the Serpent event, and then later on the Frostline event from that year. So the story goes on from this.
Nice
Either way,
piece of
I digress.
nice piece of information. Didn't know that. That's great. And I like what you did. You just used the in-game info channel to get the answer, which is something you want to know about lore. Your first stop should be in-game info. Check description on an object that you're looking at, and you'll get a lot of info.
Yeah,
Show was very useful.
Because of that thing that makes Outer Ring important in the lore, I think they should add Noxium ores to Outer Ring.
I agree, and they did say that one of the things that they mentioned was that they want to start giving like different regions potentially bonuses that would make them uniquely interesting. And so it'd be interesting if Outer Ring becomes the only region of nullsec that has Noxium, for example.
Wild. Okay. That was a great piece of a little bit of history, and I'm glad you could update that. And so we figured out they're a Ukrainian. There's the tabs. That's where they went. So okay, let's move on to this year in EVE Online. I guess that went out by CCP, right? They do that at the end of every year.
Yeah, it's the year in review video. It only covers the character that you log into it for this year, unlike all the characters that the game's determined to be your alts, like last year's was.
Right. So last year was the first year that we got this year in year. Previously, in previous years, what they did was they released a certain way of the API, so that way certain third-party developers would be able to like showcase your statistics via API on their various websites. And that was really cool a couple of times. But then last year they really upped the ante, and they sent everyone individualized videos based on your character and however many alts that you had. And they even said like how many alts that you thought, which a lot of people thought was hilarious because of whether or not CCP got it right or wrong. And then tells you a bunch of other statistics, how many kills you got, how much more you've mined, how many systems you've jumped. This year, as he pointed out, it's been changed slightly. So now you log in, and so you get it for that character, and it's only that character. They don't try to like merge multiple characters together. But the cool thing about this one is you can actually specify multiple categories that you're interested in. So rather than it trying to automatically detect what might be interesting to your character, you specify what you want in the video, and then it tells you not only what your stats are from that, but also what percent that you had, like your of all of the, what percentile that puts you in the player base.
In the player base compared to everybody else.
Yeah. So some of my stats I was really proud of. Some of my stats I was sort of depressed with, being in the like 1% most distance traveled or something like that. I was like, oh God.
How can I be in the top 6% of lore? How is that possible?
No, but I don't know about you guys. There's one that stood out to me as being really odd. I've heard a couple people mention that they don't think that some of the stats were correct. It told me that I only had one relic site last year. It's possible, but I don't want to believe that.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions about the statistics that you guys got?
I have heard other people say that something didn't smell right with their statistics, but they were pretty happy. So, the takeaway here is you can create your own video. How do you do it?
There's a link in the launcher, I think.
Yep. Yeah, they're advertising the launcher, and they've They sent it to your account's like default email address. It is, and if you just go to like the news for EVE Online, it's called Your Year in EVE.
Oh, here it
is. Also link it. We can link it in the chat.
All right. Well, this guy's toasting you. That's kind of nice.
Yes. It is. Somebody asked me if I didn't mind. I mind on my alt. Thanks.
All right. So that happened, and you should do that. That's fun end of the year thing. It's kind of interesting. What's the psychology as far as gaming goes with this kind of service, Ash?
Well, so not to like get too down into the weeds, but there's this concept called Bartle's taxonomy, which effectively defines the 4 different kinds of player motivation that ends up happening in these kinds of games, and that would be explorers, achievers, killers, and socializers. And in this case, this seems to very much focus on the achiever aspect of that drive. So this is, everybody likes to be told how awesome they were, and everybody likes to be told, what a grand scope of things were. And the God honest truth is that this has been a long year. So chances are for most people that experience this video, they're going to be hopefully reminded of how much they've really done this year. And I've actually seen several people who were like less than like even a couple months old or not the full year, and still very proud of the progress that they were able to make during that year. And so this really is an opportunity to feel like, another piece of it is like one of the things that's really cool about EVE is that we as players get showcased a lot. Either that's through in-game events or lore items or however else, like CCP recognizes us, they see us, and that's something that a lot of people really strive for. And there's like a lot of people in the lore community that are very proud of being recognized by CCP. There's other people that are very bitter when they're not recognized by CCP. And this gives everyone a little bit of an opportunity to feel like they've gotten a personalized pat on the back, and for them to share it around and be proud of what they've done. Or just laugh at CCP for their inability to actually keep track of what you're doing. One of the two.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's really interesting because one of the objects of their development has been to show a pilot's individual contribution during combat. That's been one of their development ideals. And that's usually much easier to see when you're not part of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, when you're in a small gang. But in this case, this is like the same concept. Let's show you your actual contributions to the game in general. And it seems to follow that pattern of thinking.
Right. And to avoid white knighting completely, I would also like to throw out there that there is a bit of a interesting aspect to this, which is that it requires you to have an Omega account at this time. Which means if your account has lapsed, you don't get to make it for yourself. And this actually reminds me of something that happened at the beginning of Echoes this month, which was that I got a notification that said, hey, you didn't get these rewards from your daily logins last month. You can get them now, but only if you sub for a month. And I was already subbed. So I actually had to buy another month at that time in order to access these rewards that I'm pretty sure might not have even existed before this message was sent to me. So whether or not however you think about this kind of strategy, as far as marketing and business goes, it does seem like they continue to experiment with additional ways of making Omega be valuable other than its in-game power.
Yeah. All right. So that's This Year in Eve. Check that out. It's either in your mailbox or you can find it off the launcher. Okay, Faction War update. And wow, this is a big, surprising series of events. Yesterday we found out, or actually it was a couple days ago, that Pen is out, or Wang's was folding. They basically said didn't have time to do it right, so they're not going to do it. They're going to keep the name alive for that alliance, but only for tournament play, which is what they were formed for in the first place. But there's a lot more news on this front, Ashterothi. What's going on in Gallente Militia?
This is going to be a longer story. Okay, and also these are all people that I know, but it's a situation that I haven't really been aware of, like intimately paying attention to for the last like year or so. So if I get details wrong, whatever, I'm sorry. I did reach out to Jules and Juliana Soder, the head of GMVA, and several other people to try to make sure that I had a firm grasp of what was happening. But basically, the short of it is that, oh look, Faction Warfare died again. Ever since really the beginning of Citadels, there's been a cascade of kind of events that have led to the overall winding down of Faction Warfare when it comes to organizations that are interested in continuing to actually fight over the objectives of Faction Warfare. And as a result of that, over time, we ended up with basically a few organizations that still stayed together and stayed in the war zone for almost exclusively RP reasons. Places like, GMVA, one of the oldest alliances. GMVA has been in Faction Warfare since before alliances were allowed to be in Faction Warfare. It was the Valor Accords. It was created to try to unify the Gallente Faction Warfare group under one banner. That was what it was originally designed for.
So I'm sorry, it's not an alliance; it's a coalition of sorts.
It's an alliance.
It's an alliance.
Okay.
The alliance Valor Accords was created in an attempt to pull together the disparate forces of the Gallente Militia in 2009. I want to say, maybe even a little bit before that, into one cohesive force. That's why it's called the Valor Accords. That's what GMVA is. Gallente Militia Valor Accords. The Valor Accords, Valor being one of the key systems. It is the headquarters of the current Gallente government. So the idea is that the various different members of the militia gathered together in Valor and had a meeting and came together under one alliance, and GMVA was made. They've never really 100% like lived up to or been that ideal. In an odd way, that's kind of what Fed Up was originally sort of designed to be too. But my point is that GMVA and Juliana Soder have been the longest standing RP, rock solid, in the war zone, doing Gallente Militia stuff, predating the Inferno changes.
Yeah, Soder ran for president of the Gallente Federation.
Soder ran for the president of the Gallente Federation and was allowed to by CCP because everybody recognized how much he has been part of the Gallente lore and community for over a decade. It's actually shocking how often when I'm doing like some research as to what was going on in the lore like 10 years ago that I run into Juliana Soder's posting. So what we have here is Snuff, who gained a whole bunch of strength during the original World War B, comes back into the war zone and begins to oppress everybody in the area and starts to cause more and more groups to collapse or move out. We see, Templars leave. We see Fed Up leave. We see a lot of other groups like that. But GMVA, well, let me take a step. Wangs, which was our draw, was just one of the basic groups of Gallente Militia back in like 2013, 2015 era. But unlike the other Gallente Militia groups, they chose to be under the shadow of Snuff, which was a very hard place to be. Most of the rest of us in the militia stayed just out at the edge of jump range, basically, of Snuffed Out to build our bases. So ultimately, eventually, Wangs formed an agreement, an alliance, or a blue status with Snuff, and this is what led to the Gallente Civil War. And GMVA and others attacked Wangs and tried to force them to leave the militia. Called them traitors to the militia for dealing with the pirate lords, and lost pretty handedly. It was unfortunately. So it was kind of decided that we got to work together, otherwise we're going to eradicate each other. So ever since then, even though Wangs has since left the war zone, GMVA has remained relatively friendly with Wangs, and therefore by that agreement have also remained somewhat protected from Snuff. So now you have Wangs, which is Pen is Out Alliance, has now that Snuff has come back, Snuff came back and was decidedly much more antagonistic towards Wangs this time than before they dissolved like a year ago. And therefore, this has been kind of this pressure to figure out how these different groups are going to get along. And starting this week, the answer is they're not. So Wangs has basically collapsed. They went from 600 members to 400 members within the last week. All of their structures were reinforced by Snuff yesterday, I believe it was. And then today, Julianus, GMVA, and Trigger Happy have announced that they are leaving the war zone completely, which is the only thing I can think of is I hope that CCP sees this as a warning call. That's like, this content was really, really good, and it could be good again, but it's not working right now. And we've done everything we can to make it work.
You meant to say I am to misbehave, not Trigger Happy. Trigger Happy is the next story.
I'm sorry. Yep, you're right. I'm sorry. Thank you. That dyslexia thing with names. Any rate, yeah. So we really, really, really need something that does two things. One, we need to revitalize faction warfare, and the fixes to the mechanics are insufficient because fixes to the mechanics have rolled out, but without some sort of excitement to it, without CCP making an event related to it or some sort of a draw to it, the overall interest in engaging in it has waned over time. Nobody wants to pick up the flag of the empires right now, and that's really an engagement problem by CCP. But secondarily, the real issue here is the fact that supers and titans can project into lowsec, which means that in order to be a stable group in lowsec, you have to actually be a nullsec group, because you can't build supers in Titans in lowsec. So if you want any kind of consistency and have any kind of buildup of force, you actually need to build up a whole different area in order to be able to support this area. And so you either do that, which some people have been willing to do, or you're not. And over time, the people that have been just wanting to get good fights and small gang PvP and skirmishing in lowsec have had the fun stomped out of them by people who are willing to drop forces that are literally unbuildable in that environment in order to overwhelm them.
I kind of agree with Xylix Zenith here, where he says there's no real advantage to being in faction war and lots of penalties.
Well, I mean, there was advantages in a way, and in a weird way, those advantages haven't changed, but the way that we value them have. I think that, well, first of all, I made a fortune in faction warfare, but more importantly, my faction warfare medal, let me pull it up real quick. Is it history? No, it's character.
Well,
if I go up to my
medal
decoration,
if you can't find it in your drawers.
Hey, calm down. So
it's right here in this sock, in this drawer.
The Wings of Valor. The fires of liberty have made their inexorable march, led by the brave men and women of the Federal Defense Union. It is your triumphs that which show the justice and equality shall forever reign supreme. Today, the Gallente Federation presents you with the wings of valor. Jacques Rodin. This is because in 2013, we conquered 100% of the war zone. It was the second time it had happened, and so the 1986 people that were involved in that for that month in Gallente faction warfare and got any LP whatsoever during that time was awarded this medal. It's the only time it's been awarded, and it probably will never be awarded again. That, like, you can't tell me that this isn't worth it, right? Like, nice. When you look at when I pull up the war zone and I see that it's green and not blue, that's why I fight. That's why I was in faction warfare. That's why I'm so upset that faction warfare eventually decayed into just like good fight generation system and not people that really cared about making their side win.
Yeah. What's on the board? Good point. Well, all right. So that is what's happened there. Let's move along to the last story. Thanks very much for getting us up to speed on that. I think that's going to be something that unfolds for a little while, and we'll come back and revisit faction war.
It is going to be interesting because we know that CCP has really been talking about faction warfare a lot more recently, which, I mean, 2 years ago they were like, we have nothing planned for at least a year. Like, so like the change in tone and things is dramatic. So it'll be interesting to see if there will be a faction warfare changeover or rework. B, what will it look like, and C, will it be enough to change the interest levels of the people involved? Because the good news is that the sites that we actually fight over for faction warfare, generally speaking, are designed to suppress the influence of things like Titans and Capitals and even really battleships or other things like that. It's simply the idea that like if you want to have a structure in LowSec on a long enough timeline, there's going to be overwhelming force knocking on your door. So we got to figure out a way to make faction warfare function and be a place where people and organizations can operate in that is not able to be suppressed nearly as much by those overwhelming forces.
Right. And we can go into faction warfare and get into all the things that really kind of tripped it up, like structures and how that affected the war zone. But we're just going to steer clear of that today and move on to the next story, which is Trigger Happy disbanding. Gregorian, do you have any information on this? If not, I do.
Can you say that again?
Do you know about Trigger Happy disbanding?
I just know what he told you in the TIS public channel.
Yeah. I talked to them a little bit afterwards, and there's no word on what the corporations belong to Trigger Happy are going to do. But they basically, the leaders who were running it got busy in real life. And so it's not only an issue of the leader getting busy in real life, but the successor. And that's kind of rare. Normally the successor can handle it for a while, but they both got busy at the same time, and there doesn't seem to be an end to it. So let's have a look at what they're, so they're going to start going down here. There were about 400, a little over 400 characters there. And these are pretty good fighters. So it's going to be interesting to see where these guys end up that are going to stick around. The actual leaders, though, they needed to take a break. I was asking them if there was any pressure, like was there, they're under pressure right now because Fraternity is coming up north, Winter Coalition, and they're starting to take over. I mean,
my corporation had a few moons in Venal that Trigger Happy liked to bash, and they'd been also going across the regional gate into renter space rented out by Horde and Fraternity, and I guess Fraternity was not happy, it looks like.
I've also heard, and maybe this is related, that Fraternity is going to charge a lot more than the current landlords, so that a renting corporation that might have been renting from a Trigger Happy type entity, right? Because there's disparate groups there. It's not just one group. Let's actually take a look at that map. If you go to talkinginstations.com, we have the what are called player influence maps built by Verite, I believe, right here under maps. And if you look at this, you can see that that's interesting. It goes backwards. The this way. No, it doesn't help. Okay, there's lots of little nation states up here. Actually, if you look at the coalition map, it's a little easier to see even there. This whole white area here is different alliances, right? So the blue's on the blue team, that's Legacy. Winter Coalition is the purple, that's PanFam, that's kind of PandaFam. It's wow, Winter Coalition plus PanFam, which is Pandemic Legion and NC Dot. These names are starting to trip me up. So that's the purple team. And right now, the big war is basically the purple team and the blue team is attacking the gold team, which is Imperium. So on the board in a big way is this white team here that you can see. And they're not really affiliated with any group. They're kind of neutral states. They haven't picked a side. They don't want a side. They want to stay small and independent. But they also are renting space to people because they can't utilize all that space. So they rent it out to other players. And that's what these big groups do to make money so they can keep fighting with that money. And people who want to just use the land for harvesting can pay the military bill for them. And that's what you're doing there. But it looks like Fraternity, because of the changes that have happened to NPC ratting, the income has dropped significantly for them. But there may be other reasons as well. It seems to be moving to the north. It looks like it's not public. And we asked Noros on the 23rd when we had him here, we were interviewing him saying, we heard you're moving to Vale, which is up here in this area. And he said, well, yeah, temporarily, but there's no word on if it's going to be permanent. But I think there might be a massive adjustment. And I started thinking about why a group like Fraternity would move away from deep space where they're safe to come up here where they're closer to Empire space, which means they're closer to travel that people could use to attack them. And it's just a little less secure than deep space is. And I think it has to do with the future of harvesting in general. You know, where's the money-making possibility going to be if not in nullsec? Well, low-sec is looking really good right now. And so is Empire space. There's money to be made in each of the security strata of EVE Online. And that tells you something. I think they're waiting and seeing, and they're going to look at multiple avenues of income generation instead of just sitting back in deep space and owning it and harvesting it. I think that's the future of EVE Online. And you can see that through Hordes, what Horde's doing, and you can see that through what Winter Coalition is doing as well. Now, all that to say, they're moving in to this white area where the neutral states are, and that's where Trigger Happy is. So they are under a considerable amount of pressure. And I've heard the renters that were renting from these neutral states now have a new landlord, it looks like, in Winter Coalition, and that the prices may go up for the systems they are renting. Not sure about that, but it would be interesting to see how that all plays out.
I wonder how much trouble Volta's going to have, since they're the next big group that has a substantial amount of renters.
Yeah, well, it depends on the appetite of Winter Coalition, because with numbers and a time zone that is deep in Chinese time zone, that is a lethal combination, right? So we'll have to see. In other words, Fraternity is a powerful organization because it not only has a lot of people and a lot of people that have generated a ton of wealth and have a lot of skill points now, but it also has a time zone that it dominates pretty well. Not completely, but pretty well. And that is a coveted time zone where things can happen in the middle of the night that they can control. And then you wake up to your stuff reinforced the next morning and you can't do anything about it unless you stay up all night. So interesting stuff. Okay, so thanks for that. Oh, go ahead.
I have a minor correction to the previous story.
Oh, great.
I just got in contact with some of the Wang's dudes who clarified a few things for me. But apparently, so Wang's leadership has basically been more or less AFK. So the decision was to if not disband, at least go down to like a lower key. Snuff and Wangs have not been friends since Snuff reformed, which I mentioned, and therefore Snuff basically was like, oh, well, if you're not going to be powerful, we're just going to ref all your stuff. But apparently it looks like the assets are actually going to be transferred to Snuff more or less peacefully, and we'll see whether or not Wangs, this new, smaller, kind of more casual Wangs, will continue.
Yeah, and I'd also
forces.
heard that for one of my friends told me that a GMVA was trying to push the Triglavian invasion in order to choke Caldari space out in order to permanently win the war, and
they did.
And it seems to have been pretty effective.
Yeah, because Caldari space was just Swiss cheesed by the Triglavians. Natural disadvantages, but was there any strategy for that on the Gallente side?
Well, the way the invasions played out?
Well, did Gallente kind of help Triglavians wreak havoc on Caldari space?
This was more of just a natural result of the Caldari rats being just incredibly poor at dealing with Triglavian rats. But it is true that Ikoria, the Gallente Militia, did help with Ikoria turning over. And then once it did go into first liminality, it was just a bloodbath, because after like a decade of the Caldari using it as a beachhead, they were very thirsty for what they could get out of that. But outside of that, they, like, obviously, what was it? The one that everybody cares about.
Oh,
Nyarja. When Nyarja got under attack, I think there was some interest. But other than that, most of the guys that were in faction warfare see themselves as low sec PvPers and didn't want to really be bothered too much with the invasions at the time.
Yeah, this friend did send me a few screenshots of Julianus Soter saying that he was pushing to break faction warfare to save it, is what he said.
That's interesting. Well, in any case, it did play out, and when Poshvin was created by Triglavians, it took a lot of Caldari space with it. So Caldari is permanently memed or changed. I don't think I wanted to say memed. I wanted to say maimed. Yeah.
So just
meme too, but
to dig into it just a little bit, the rats for each of the empires were based off of the base T2 resist profile for that empire. So as it turns out, the Caldari, because they use shields, shields have a base EM resist of 0. And the Mimitar, who are also shields, their enemy race is the Amar, whose primary weapons damage is EM. And each race's T2 tank is designed to tank against their enemy empire's damage type. So this means that Mimitar shields have a really good EM resistance in their shields. So for instance, the Scimitar, has really good EM resist comparatively.
At least you didn't say Scimitar after all that pause. But you said it right.
Well, I wanted to say Basilisk, but then I realized I was going down what I meant to say with that is, so the Basilisks have a high thermal resistance, which is why we like to use them against the Trig, because Trig generally use thermal and explosive damage. But here's where it gets really interesting. So the Triglavians have the missiles that do burst damage, and that burst damage is EM and kinetic, which means if the Caldari rats have 0% EM resistance and the Triglavians burst damage dealers do predominantly EM and kinetic, it means that the Triglavian rats can cut through the Triglavian rats can cut through the Caldari rats very, very easily. Meanwhile, the Caldari's ability to jam things, while will stop the thing that they're jamming, it doesn't stop secondary effects very easily, and so it just isn't as effective in dismantling the Triglavians. Meanwhile, if you look at the Amar, you have energy neutralization and tracking disruption, which both of those are extremely effective against the Triglavians. And so the Amar, like, even with the invasion, with pro-Triglavian forces fighting on behalf of the Amarr and almost nobody resisting it. It was very difficult to push any Amarr system. Meanwhile, Caldari systems, even just left to their own devices, would often fall to the Triglavians just almost by default. This was rebalanced about halfway through, and they were given a buff to their EM resistances, but it was still pretty low, and the Trig still continued to be very effective at killing them.
Right. All right, Gregorian supplied us with that Juliana Soder comment, where he effectively says, the effect I intend is for CCP to delete faction war. So by saving it, he means getting rid of faction war.
I mean, I can only assume that to replace it, right? Because that's part of the problem is that when we talk about what to do about faction warfare, we're really caught up in the mechanics of the way it is. We talk about like what mechanic we want to change rather than what are the goals of a play style like faction warfare, and whether or not the mechanics of faction warfare as they are match those at all. It may not be a matter of changing the way plexes work or changing the way that tether works. It may be a complete reimagining of what it means to work for a militia in a low security space in order to fight over territory, in potentially as dramatic as any sovereignty change or whatever, where the new implementation has nothing to do with the original one.
Yeah. Okay, so more on faction war later when we can talk about some of the ways to improve it. But I get your point, and that is you want faction war, you just don't want it the way it is now because it's kind of broken.
Well, people want to be able to work for one of the empires, right? Like, I mean, not everybody does, but there are lots of people that like see the Gallente or see the Mimitar, and they've chose a race in the beginning, and they're like, well, I chose Mimitar, I want to be pro Mimitar. That's what I decided. I was a good little Mimitar boy. So if there's an opportunity to sign up and fight for the Mimitar, they're going to want to. And that's really where it breaks down, where the reality of faction warfare doesn't really play into the fantasy of why somebody might get into faction warfare.
Right.
And that's actually a big piece of this, is that we now have these entities that have been in faction warfare for so long that by and large, they've kind of given up on the whole like war zone thing. Like they're over the plexing mechanics. They're not like, they've done this for years, but they're still like proud of the name. And so they fight and they use this area for good conflict and all that stuff. But you need new blood who can see this with new interest and see the King of the Hill mechanics and see the challenges that await them and get excited by that.
Yeah, well, hopefully there's some work done there. So I guess that's what Soder is after. Okay.
Let's hope.
Our last story for the day is 47 kills in a magnet.
Yeah, so this is another one of those great examples of this event and kind of the really great things that have come out of this. And I just found this right before tonight, or we went on the air. But basically, there's a dude in a magnate that's just running around and killing explorers in these metaliminal in the winter storms, and so he's gotten 47 kills in the last few weeks, or like since this storm has started, in only magnates. So this means that he can scan down, and the hacking sites are relatively difficult to scan down. They have like a scan strength requirement of like 90, and so a lot of explorers, like if you are able to scan it, you're kind of protected because only people that have that much scan strength can get there. But here you see that there's actually been quite a number of these guys out in these metaliminal storms actively hunting, especially explorers, because they're the most exposed of the three different roles. So here we have Gatling autocannon in a magnate that uses autocannons. I looked up his loss. He does properly use autocannons in his magnate.
Yeah.
And he's blapping Asteros, man. You can't hate on that, man. That is
I was just looking. It seems like he's picking off Asteros, isn't he?
Yep. And that's what I'm saying. So these guys are going into these systems to try to get the easy hacks, to get the winter prizes, and chances are he's actually scanning these sites down, and then like he basically just keeps them all saved, and then he keeps an eye on them. And as soon as he sees anyone going into any of the sites, he just warps to them and gets them.
Well, look out. It's not all free.
Yep.
Yeah, I lost an Astero last night doing that, but that was to a group, Stratios and some stealth bombers.
The big key here is that if you're in Astero and you're in the site and you see a magnate land, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to think that you've got the upper hand too. So there's probably a couple of these people that didn't run even when they could have.
Yeah. So that is an Amarian frigate using its enemy's T2 weaponry, the Minmatar weaponry. So that's kind of interesting.
Right. Well, this is actually pretty common in Amar ships because Amar are generally known for having really good capacitor to make up for their laser. But at the same time, a lot of these ships don't have laser bonuses. So, and in fact, the Magnate being the Tech 1 equivalent of the Anathema is made by the Khana Kingdom, which means that it is missile launcher related, which would mean the Magnate is also somewhat missile launcher related. Hence the reason why it's kind of unlocked. And so you see this with several ships. The Abaddon used to be this way, but now it has a turret damage bonus. But anytime you see a Amarian ship without a turret damage bonus, often you'll see an energy turret capacitor bonus. If you see that, chances are somebody's going to be slapping some autocannons on that.
Yeah, like
Stratios
the Punisher
are a good example.
The Punisher is a one that is very common that as tackle ship fit with autocannons.
Right. Actually, speaking of faction warfare, back when we did big attrition fights, I believe we used blaster Punishers.
Oh yeah, that's the most DPS you can get from a T1 frigate.
They were really good, and they're tough nuts to crack too. So it's really good.
I get it. So Amarian ships have good capacitors, but they lack actual weaponry bonuses. So then just use any kind of weapon because it doesn't matter. You're not getting a weapons bonus from your race.
Right. The ship's designed to have this much draw from its weapons, and then you give it a weapon that doesn't have any draw, and that just gives you more availability for everything else.
Power, So energy allows you to use utility rather than just weaponry.
The thing about blaster Punishers is that while the Incursus and Merlin have better blaster damage bonuses, it's not enough to make up for only 3 turrets instead of 4 like the Punisher has.
Right.
Oh, cool. All right, so watch out while you're out there. Stay safe. Well, we were going to do a little more on Talking in Stations history. We'll save it for tomorrow, but there's just going to be a lot of actual news going on. As you could see, today was a full day of really big events. Trigger Happy going away, Wang's going away. Those are big groups, been around for the last few years and in interesting ways they've been around. You also saw a massive front open up. I shouldn't say a front opened up, but you see an acceleration on the Delve front. And Triumvirate duking it out with former renters from the Bastion area and the Fountain area. So there's just a ton going on, and I think it's going to be that way till the end of the year, where we have a show on the 31st to announce who our most influential people are and group. So it's kind of interesting. And then I'll reveal who I think. Well, maybe I should do that now. Well, no, I'll wait till tomorrow, and we'll talk about most influential tomorrow, and then we'll make announcements on Thursday. Cool, man. Your sweater was such a hit today. See all those comments?
I'm telling you, like, this is one of those things that Emma was insistent that we both get ugly Christmas sweaters this year, and this is the best decision I made all winter. I'm telling you,
it works. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out. This was really enjoyable and relaxing. And I want to thank you guys sticking with us and watching us for as long as you did. Thanks. That's all that we have today. We will be back tomorrow for more Talking in Stations. See you guys.
Are we raiding?
Yeah, let's raid. You got somebody?
Well, Carneros is on CCP. We have
done.
Ron. We have... Okay, there you go.
Say no more. Enjoy. We'll see you guys tomorrow.